Expanding out to the Big Ten once again, Ryan D is asking, as we review the schedule, the most difficult stretch in the schedule, and Joel is asking for the biggest surprise possibility in the Big Ten in 2021. So for me, I think right out of the gate, Minnesota, Oregon, Tulsa is a pretty good stretch for the Buckeyes to have to deal with. Certainly two teams that they are substantially better than, and one that they're decidedly better than in Oregon. So it's not like a gauntlet. But most likely a little bit tougher than that is a trip to Indiana, Penn State, and then if Nebraska comes through and plays better football, as we would all expect at some point based on the recruiting rankings, Indiana, Penn State, and Nebraska with two of those on the road.
Yeah, that's where I am. The second one. Yeah, it kind of looms pretty large. And then you come out of that, I think they play Purdue, which Purdue is always kind of a physical team and kind of that gum on the bottom of your shoe type team that's kind of hard to put away sometimes. I mean, they're not elite, but they don't typically lay down either. They fight you all the way to the end. And so that could be a sticky game on the end of that 3-game stretch as well. But, I agree with you. If Indiana and Nebraska are all they're cracked up to be, and if Penn State, obviously had figured some things out the second half of the season that they didn't have figured out in the first half of the season, if they carry that over and continue that win streak, and maybe haven't lost a game when they come to Ohio State, and if now won set, or it would be by that point 10 or 11 in a row, dating to this past season, then they've got a lot going for them coming to Columbus. So I don't know what their schedule stacks up like prior to that, or even if they're playing anybody outside the conference that's going to beat them. But at any rate, yeah, I look at those two stretches. The second one you mentioned is probably the more difficult.
And if that game was outs, then maybe I'd go with the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that they find a way to reschedule that later in the decade for a return game. I hope I'm still doing this by the time that they do it, because I'd like to go out there and see what all the fuss is about at Oregon. I guess the day that we were supposed to be there this year, they were having the wildfires out there, and there was smoke and fog everywhere. It was open to debate whether or not they would have been able to have the game or not, I think, that day that the game was supposed to be played.
So we get the typical pecking order in the Big Ten, although Indiana's kind of crashed the party to a certain extent. So, Tony, if you're looking at a surprise team, and of course we want to see spring football and really get a feel for it and make a better selection later, but as it stands right now, who do you think could jump out?
The thing is, like, Indiana is no longer a surprise because of what they did last year. And I think they have overtaken Michigan State as a top 4 in the East. So I think you have to look out west, and is there a surprise there? I see all of those teams as even, pretty much. So my surprise team just popped in my head right now, Michigan, where people are kicking them now when they're down. I looked at their schedule earlier today, and I think I came up with 8-4. Could that be 9-3, 10-2? I don't think so, but maybe. I mean, if we're talking teams that are capable of something, they have more talent than most. The expectations are down. Nobody is expecting anything from Jim Harbaugh. He's got a new coaching staff. There's new energy there. We have no idea if the bulk of this coaching staff can call plays correctly or develop players. But hey, if they get Ohio State at home, so there is that. The back half of their schedule, they could lose, probably 4 of those 6. But if they're 6-0, then they believe in themselves, and there's this power, if you're a Michigan man, of just self-belief. And as you're seeing things happen, you believe yourself even more. Whether it's all a lie or not, it doesn't matter. You just start to believe that you are this perfect entity. And then of course Don Brown calls a blitz, and then things fall flat. But Don Brown is gone now, so maybe things settle down. I think maybe Rutgers also, but not surprise worthy enough. Can they beat an Indiana or a Michigan or a Penn State at home? Like, maybe, but I'll go Michigan, because I I just think the West cannibalizes itself, and I don't know if anybody stands out there right now.
And before you go, Steve, Steve Dace, our Michigan podcast guy, was on. I was on his show yesterday. He was on over here, and he thinks it's going to go either or for the Wolverines. Either they catch that stride you're talking about, Tony. It all comes together. They start the 5-star freshman, and they get some mojo working, and they have a season like they had a couple of years ago before it all came crashing down in Columbus, or it falls apart from the start because I had set up a kind of A to Z process that any college football player and program goes through from the time you recruit the player all the way to the result on the field. And I had a culture column in there that you run those players through that process of culture, structure, what you deliver to them that builds them as young men. And Steve, they said, we don't have that at Michigan. That's a 0. That's an F. That's a failing right there. We recruit really good players, and we can coach them to a certain extent. But Jim Harbaugh is basically the brand. He's the personality, but it's not a culture. He's just a guy. And that's where we fail. So he thinks it's either going to take off or they're going 4-8.
But even think back to that. This is just a microcosm real quick. When Michigan players where on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football, so many of them would say, I'm this person from this high school. And they don't – somebody would not say they're from Michigan. And that's a culture thing from way back when. And so I don't think it's just a Jim Harbaugh thing. I also think it's a Lloyd Carr thing and certainly a Rich Rod thing. So sorry, Steve, but that's just one thing I want to throw in there. It's like there's been a culture issue for a while there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to me by default, the people who do the preseason polls and the magazines always have Michigan. It used to be they were always 5, 6, 7, 8, and then they couldn't justify that anymore because they never finished in the top 20. And so then they dropped them here in the last 3 or 4 years. They've been anywhere from 12 to 16, very rarely outside the top 15. And they can't justify that this year. This is going to be their lowest preseason ranking in any magazine or AP or coaches poll in 40 years, probably this coming year, coming off the season that they had 2-4 or whatever it was. And it's going to be interesting to read the write-ups and see what people really think about Michigan. And has everyone finally, for the last time, jumped off that bandwagon and realized there's nothing special there. There's nothing, and there hasn't been for years. There's just nothing. If you change the name of that program to Wake Forest, people wouldn't bat an eyelash at whatever record they came back with. But because it's Michigan, they have to be in the top 10 to start the season. And they have to go 8-4 every year and lose to their rival by multiple touchdowns. And then they're right back up there in the top 12 to 15 in the preseason the following year. And they lead the world in where they started to where they ended, always being a minus in the last 20 years.
Well, Steve, I got to say, since Harbaugh took over in 2015, up until last year, they were 9-3, 10-2 all those seasons.
Yeah, but even the losses, you came away, they get smoked. I mean, it was
they did. That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
there's
you're right. You're right. The 1 versus or 2 versus 3 game was a special thing. But there's just, I don't know. There's just they had little dollops here and there, I guess, but it's just nothing that I don't know. You could put them in the same category as Florida State and, Tennessee and all these other programs that were great in the 80s and 90s, but just don't have anything going for them right now. And they are starting at rock bottom again, trying to put one brick on top of another brick on top of another brick. And it's hard to play catch up in college football. It takes a while, and there's no quick fix, although this one-time transfer thing, you could bring in 4 offensive starters and 3 defensive starters from other schools in one offseason and change your fortune like that if you get the right guys. But I don't know. I guess we'll see how that all plays out. But I'm for a surprise team to get back to that. If I had to pick one, man, Damn, that is just tough. I want to go with somebody in the West. I don't think Iowa's a real big surprise. They're always in that 8-9 wins. Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern won the division second time in 3 years, but I think it'd be a big surprise if they won it again without Peyton Ramsey. I don't know. Mark me down, as I have no idea who would be a surprise team in the Big Ten, because there'll be one, but Lord, hell if I know who it'll be.
Don't hold me to it, but if we're just talking about elevating from what has been garbage for about 10 years to, let's say, 7-5, I'm going to say Maryland, because I think they've recruited really well. They've got talent on the roster, and this past recruiting class, which probably won't have much of an impact, is heavy on the defensive side. And I'll say, for a team that wins 8 or 9 games typically, can they make that 2015 push to a Big Ten championship? Would be, for me, Iowa. I think they could possibly be a serious contender this year.
Yeah, I need to study depth charts and see who really has everybody back, and talk to our 24/7 publishers before spring practice begins, a lot of these places, and get a firm idea of what we're looking at. I think our company did have a Big Ten roundup of sorts this past week, and it was interesting, what some of their thoughts were. I think they banking on Penn State coming back pretty good, and Rutgers maybe showing a few things, as you guys talked about. But the West, as we said, I mean, nothing would surprise me. I think Wisconsin will have a winning record. But, the ones at the bottom could go from, 2 and whatever to 5-2. I mean, or I don't know. I guess I don't have my numbers right, but 5-4, I guess. Wouldn't necessarily surprise me. Some of it's the draw you get with the crossover teams. If you don't have to play Ohio State or whoever, Indiana, that really catches fire from the East, if you don't have to play them, then so much the better. But, I think Indiana is going to have another really good season. I mean, with Penix back and Freifogel, I mean, it's kind of like Ohio State. You just figure, just mark them down for 35 or 40 points every game, and then was it enough to win the game? That's the question you're left with.
I think the West is turning into a really good division, and I think with Bielema and Illinois, they could possibly become decent. I'm not predicting anything lofty for Illinois, but could become decent under his. And then Nebraska is the wild card, but not an elite. Like, there's not going to be an elite over there. But man, they could just fill up the top 25 with like 5 teams. We could see that over the next several seasons.
I agree. They're recruiting well enough, and they've got stability with the coaching staffs too, which I think Bielema is going to be at Illinois for a long time, and I think Frost is probably going to be at Nebraska a long time. Brom's probably going to be at Purdue a long time. I mean, I just don't get a sense where there's the one that kind of you wonder about is Fleck. If he's able to have another big year at Minnesota, does he jump off to a Georgia level type program that is in the national contention potentially? But I'm not saying he's going to Georgia. I'm just saying that was what kind of popped into my head. Somebody that is a top 10 program that is looking for a coach for whatever reason. Could he be that next elite guy that emerges? But
USC.
USC, that there's an example. But I don't know. I'm bullish on the Big Ten. I think Urban Meyer, what he did to raise the Big Ten can never be stated enough. I mean, it was in the bowels of lethargy, certainly, and he made everybody care again and try. So that's because you see that if you do well, there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, like Ohio State winning the championship and now been to the playoffs 3 times since they've won the championship. So Michigan State's been to the playoff. I mean, you can get there from here if you have a great year.
There's your raffle ticket question. Who's going to be the next Big Ten team to make the playoff other than Ohio State? Penn State would seem to be the
Penn State. Yeah, Penn State has all the advantages going for them with a fertile recruiting ground in Pennsylvania and the East Coast. If Franklin were to stay there and find whatever is missing to take that one last step to where they're Ohio State's quasi equal and can beat them twice every 5 years or something, it's a big step. But I don't know. That's the one thing that he can't. That's the one stumbling block he's got. It's kind of like he's Auburn and Ohio State's Alabama. It's just you're always knocking on the door, but very rare that you get to go through that door. So
I'll go Wisconsin 12-0 or 12-1, losing to Ohio State in a Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, they would have been in.
Grant Mertz is like a senior or something like that, playing against Ohio State as the best team in the nation.
2017 came within 6 points.